This is Keys to the Shop, episode 127, Passion and Curiosity, a conversation with Major Cohen of Starbucks Coffee. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFurio. I'm your host for the show, and I am so glad to have you here today. I'm always glad to have you here today. But today, this is a very special episode because we are talking with the Senior Projects Manager for Starbucks Global, Major Cohen. He has carved out such an incredible career at Starbucks for the past 23 years. He's been at the leading edge of their training and education and their entry into the third wave coffee movement. He has just a ton to share here, and it's such an honor to have him on the show and to get to learn from and be inspired by his work in coffee. Now, really quickly, if you have not done so, please do subscribe to Keys to the Shop and consider leaving a rating or review for the show. And when you subscribe, you'll always be updated on the episodes as they come out. And when you rate or review the show, it really helps the show get found by more people. So thank you in advance for that. And lastly, Keys to the Shop has been nominated for a Sprudgie Award. Sprudge.com has put this out for the past 10 years. It's basically the Oscars of coffee, many different categories in the specialty coffee community, and we've been nominated for Best Coffee Podcast for the second year in a row. And I have to say thank you to all of you who voted to put us into the finals. Very honored, so I appreciate all of you doing that. Now, the voting for the finals is open until January 4th, so if you are so inclined, I would really appreciate your vote for Keys to the Shop for a Best Coffee Podcast. I'll have links to that page where you can vote available in the show notes for this episode on iTunes, as well as the homepage over at keystotheshop.com. So thank you very much, everybody. Again, I'm honored to be able to serve you through this podcast. And, I said it in episode 100. I'll say it again. You all are the keys to the shop. Now, this show would not be possible were it not for the support of our fantastic sponsors. And I want to take a moment to thank them here, starting with Prima Coffee. So Prima Coffee is a leading specialty coffee equipment supplier who curates the best equipment from around the world to fit perfectly with the needs of both their enthusiast and professional customers. Helping you succeed in making great coffee at home or in the cafe is what drives them. So if you're looking for the best equipment and expert assistance to go along with it, then look no further than prima-coffee.com. Now through December 31st, customers can receive a Mazzer Mini electric grinder in silver entirely for free with their Astoria espresso machine purchase. So there's a free grinder up for grabs here. This is huge. So simply add the machine and the grinder to your cart and see instant savings. Again, that's prima-coffee.com to find out more about that deal and hundreds of other things that are going to help you make great coffee. So thank you very much, Prima, for your support. Keys to the Shop. Now, I'd like to also thank the fine people over at Pacific Foods. They are the ones that produce the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages that are designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they demand. So you could be using almond, coconut, soy, oat, or rice milk, and its ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched silky texture, and keep the flavor balance of the beverage focused on coffee. It's important. It makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. If you just search anything about Pacific, it won't be a surprise. They are a huge supporter of the specialty coffee community, the barista community, and these products are just testimony to that fact. Now, I would highly encourage you to go to pacificfoods.com, find out more about the Barista Series, follow them on Instagram. Do whatever you can to get your hands on these products and see how the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages can help elevate the non-dairy options in your cafe. So thank you very much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. All right, well, today we are honored to welcome to the show Major Cohen. Major is the Senior Projects Manager for Starbucks Global, and today is nothing short of a mentorship session. You and I get to learn from somebody who has an extraordinary amount of experience over the course of the years, 23 years with Starbucks now, And, we've all been influenced. We've all benefited from the impact that Starbucks has had over these years. Major has played a huge role in developing the standards for the coffee and the customer experience within all of their stores, and was a central figure in Starbucks' move into the third wave coffee concepts with projects such as Roastery Coffee and Tea, 15th Avenue, and the Starbucks Reserve Roastery. Now, Major began his journey with Starbucks back in 1995 as a part-time barista. He was a part of a team opening a new store in suburban Boston, and at the time, Starbucks was just beginning its Eastern U.S. expansion. Major was a school teacher, an art department head. He was a local entrepreneur who imported and distributed smoked salmon and worked as a commercial photographer in Boston for 19 years prior to joining Starbucks. And over the next 8 years, he progressed from barista to shift supervisor to store manager to learning specialist to district manager. And during that time, he was recognized as a manager of the quarter, and he also received the Northeastern Zone Career Achievement Award. Now, in his current role, Major contributes to Starbucks' success by managing the development and implementation of large or highly complex new programs and processes. He manages coffee and tea expertise and knowledge programs for the organization that create enthusiasm, instill pride, and lead education for Starbucks coffee and quality in order to improve partner performance and ensure customer satisfaction. So you can see Major is pretty invested into coffee, and to say he's passionate about it, I think, is a bit of an understatement. As he says here in this episode, coffee kind of chose him, and his passion and curiosity have been one of the keys to his success, kind of a theme in this discussion. We cover basically the arc of his career. It's really fascinating. And we cover basically the arc of his career, the keys to his success and early, mentorship that helped him along the way. We also get an unofficial history of Starbucks as we talk with Major, because he has been so close to key figures within that company for years and continues to be. Major delivers key pieces of wisdom, best practices, and tips that we can all benefit from, and will definitely leave us more passionate for people and coffee than we were before we sat down with him. So there's a lot waiting for you in this discussion. Think of this as a mentorship session with one of Specialty Coffee's greatest success stories. So here now is my conversation with the Senior Projects Manager for Starbucks Global, Major Cohen. Major, welcome to Keys to the Shop. I'm honored to have you on the program.
Chris, the honor is mine. I've been looking forward to our having a chance to talk, and I'm glad the day has arrived.
Yes, indeed. And it's a very special day, not just because I get to have you on the show, but today is your birthday.
It is indeed. I feel a little bit older today, but I don't feel too old. I certainly don't feel my 68 years.
Nice. Well, I mean, you're staying so busy. You just got back from Shanghai, right?
Yes, I was in Hong Kong for 1 week, and I was in Shanghai for 1 week, and with one of my colleagues, we hosted two SCA Starbucks barista camps where we did foundation brewing, foundation barista, and intro to coffee. Excellent.
That sounds exciting. Well, happy birthday, and thank you for spending part of your birthday with us. You have, you just got back from teaching people, but you have a long history of teaching people, not just with Starbucks, but when you started what now is 23 years of working with Starbucks, you were coming out of a career as a teacher. What was the catalyst for you going from that career to coffee?
I was a teacher at Beaver Country Day School teaching photography, and I was the head of the art department, and I was there for 19 years, Chris. And at the end of 19 years, I had a kind of a revelation in which I realized that I knew that I wanted to do some other things, and I was afraid that although I could have stayed, I had a wonderful, wonderful time there. I was afraid that I was going to miss some things that I wanted to do with my life. And so I simply decided to move on and try some new things.
And so you chose coffee just on a whim. Did that seem like a good place for you to sort of get your feet wet in experimenting with the next phase of what you wanted to experiment with?
I'll be honest. I didn't choose coffee. I almost feel like coffee chose me. What happened, I was teaching photography, and I decided that I was going to freelance in the New England area, and I had been doing a little bit of freelancing. And so as a freelance photographer, like many independent operators, if you will, I was doing business in coffee shops. And at that time, a new coffee company came to Boston, and it was Starbucks. And I was sitting in Starbucks regularly, booking clients for my photography business. And a young lady who I still am connected with today took me aside one day and said that I seemed to have a great passion for coffee. And had I ever thought about working part-time in coffee, especially for a company that gave medical benefits, because she had figured out that I didn't have medical benefits. And so she began to pitch Starbucks to me. And I went home and said to my wife, I had a really interesting conversation with a person at Starbucks. And my wife actually said, and remember, this is 1994, my wife said, "What's Starbucks?" And I had to explain to her that it was a company that had come over from the West Coast, and it was a coffee company. And so a week later, I started at Starbucks as a part-time barista. I took my first coffee class, if you will, February 13th, 1995. And I've now been here 23, almost 24 years.
Incredible. So what were the early years like as you started to learn about coffee and dive into the barista craft and all that whole world? What were those early years like for you?
No, I would hesitate to say they were the greatest time that I ever had in coffee, because I've had a lot of great times, but I can't even imagine. First, I think there was a simplicity that existed to the whole business. And I have to back up a little bit. And I know that in the time that we're together today, I'm gonna sort of be somewhat of an informal historian, because I've realized in 2018 that I've been part of specialty coffee since specialty coffee has been in existence. I started off as a customer in specialty coffee, and I had a great honor of making a good friend in Boston in the 1970s, George Howell. Oh. And I know that name will be familiar to so many people who listen, Chris. And George had one shop in Boston, the Coffee Connection. It was a counter in the Garage, which was a mall in Harvard Square. And I used to go to visit George and his wife, honestly, 3 or 4 times a week. I would be sitting there and having coffee with him. And so he filled my head with a lot of what I think of as the foundation of information about great coffee that I still carry today and that I share with people. And so when I got to Starbucks, I probably knew more about coffee than many of the baristas that I was working with. And I was older, and I was a former school teacher. But I really enjoyed those initial times. I think part of it comes from something that, again, as a Starbucks person, I'm going to probably at times surprise people kind of with my Starbucks advocacy. But I'm a proud partner and proud employee at Starbucks. And I think one of the things I realized early on was that passion and curiosity were part of the core of our business. And I have to be honest, at 45 years old, as a coffee lover in this barista position, I took advantage of the fact that Starbucks was willing to let me be passionate and curious. And to some degree, I went overboard. I think that sometimes passion can be interpreted by many people when they're not talking to you face to face as crazy. But I think I was probably the crazy older barista, and I was at times out of control.
I suppose it's good to be able to dial that back instead of having to be amped up. So good to start overboard. And certainly that's incredible that in those kind of fertile times for specialty coffee, certainly, Starbucks has been the catalyst for so many of us in specialty coffee, popularizing the beverages, the coffee shop kind of resurgence in America and a lot of the world. And so it's awesome that you were able to be at the ground floor of some what is a huge movement in coffee. And you're coming from a position of having educated a lot of people and then being educated in coffee as a consumer. Obviously, it seems like your background as a teacher kind of helped you embrace all of this and become a good learner. Would you say that's the case?
There's no question about it. I think part of what has helped me be successful is that I am just that, and I appreciate your saying that. And I think that I've not shied away from any opportunities to continue to learn. And as I said, if passion and curiosity are fundamental to whoever or whatever you're involved in, then that idea of curiosity leads to learning. And so I feel as though I've always been supported in that. And honestly, I'm not unique. I think in any organization that fosters curiosity, and I sometimes joke when I share this story with people because many organizations would say that they love curiosity, but part of the problem for those organizations might be that as people learn, they generally want more. They have bigger demands. And I talk about the barista that you train to do a great job on the register and then they can work the bar. What they want to be next is the store manager. And then if you're the store manager, you've got a problem because you've created a competitor. And so, but I've always felt as though I've taken advantage of every opportunity that I could. And I feel blessed by that.
Excellent. No doubt. You're going in there with that passion and curiosity. And admittedly, you had this zeal that could be overboard at times. And I wonder, were there people in your life back then who acted as mentors to sort of channel that energy into the directions that were more helpful than hurtful for you?
Yes, not a doubt in my mind. And I'm going to be a Starbucks name dropper because you probably understand that one of the things that I have as a characteristic that has carried me through both my careers is that I'm not the least bit shy to step up and interject or inject myself. And so I can tell you that I'm a product of exactly the people that you just described. When I was working on the East Coast, I had people who very quickly identified something in me, and they were mentors helping me understand a balance between self-promotion and humility, which I don't think I had when I started, at least in this second career. Because I had been the head of the art department in a private school where I had to advocate for my department regularly, I actually landed at Starbucks and I was pretty effective as an advocate for myself. And I learned very quickly that in this particular organization, one does not have to do that. If you simply do a good job, that someone's going to probably recognize it. And so I was embarrassed at times, but I learned very quickly. And then I would tell you that I'm here now in a very successful time in my career because of the leadership at Starbucks. And it may sound weird because I'm about to mention Howard Schultz, Howard Behar, and Orrin Smith. And I'm not an executive at Starbucks, but there's something unique about what I've experienced in which I have from the very beginning felt as though I was part of something bigger than my role or what I was doing. And I knew all three of them. I know all of them. Orrin's gone now, but Howard Behar and Howard Schultz, they remain as mentors of mine today. And what's odd about that is that shouldn't be the case. Those are people who are at the highest level of our organization. And I'm not unique in that, that many, many, many employees at Starbucks would say the same thing. And I think that's part of the connection that we have to really a very unusual organization.
That's amazing. And the getting in early and being as passionate as you were, I'm sure there was, you say you took all the opportunities you could to really grow and, advocate for yourself, which is huge. Actually, we just talked about advocating for yourself as a professional in your career not too long ago on the show. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So it's awesome to have those types of mentors, plus the people that you just worked with in your stores in the early days.
Yeah.
At what point did you see yourself as a coffee educator? So you come in as this learner who is passionate about coffee. When did you really start to pursue the role of teaching those people who were teaching you in Starbucks?
In my time at Starbucks, I happened into the perfect moment because the company grew, and I think our growth is certainly something that is part of, people joke about our growth at times because we opened stores across the street from stores. But when I was beginning in 1995, if you think about it, we had, I think, around 250 or 300 stores, and we were talking about having 2,000 stores by the year 2000. At that time, a lot of the education was coming out of headquarters in Seattle. But the company experienced a transition in which they began to think about having education happen in the field. And as a district manager and as a store manager, because I'm a teacher, I was successful as an operator because I was a successful teacher. My teams were great learners, and I fostered an environment in which engagement and learning were part of what made our stores really successful. And that was not lost on anybody in the organization. And so after 8 years, I was offered the opportunity to join a very small team of coffee educators, and I was offered a chance to move to Seattle to be part of that team. By then, the company had well over 2,000 stores, and we were opening more than one store every day.
Wow. And that's the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So you are part of this team that is beginning this process of having a more granular education experience rather than that headquartered training and education. I'm curious why that was a change for Starbucks between headquarters and granular. Was it just the growth? Like, we can't keep training all these people. We need people on the field.
Yeah, it didn't make sense for us to have all of the training. In fact, we couldn't even effective training with field partners because the field was growing so fast. Mm-hmm. And so we were coordinated. The team that I was on, even when I was in New England, there was talk of my being connected to Seattle as a field coffee educator, but that was not the way that it rolled out. And so I came back. I moved to Seattle. I came back because I live here now, but I moved to Seattle and joined the team, and we began to work in connection with a very, very fast-growing field. By then, we were opening up internationally, and so with that kind of growth, you have to begin to free up and allow your field operators to make decisions and have more control. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of what happened.
Excellent. So now, after all these years, describe what you do now. What is your official role within the company?
So I have a crazy job, Chris. My official title is a senior project manager, but my unofficial title, which has become more and more official over the last 3 or 4 years especially, is that I'm currently the China Asia Pacific Coffee Ambassador. And I travel all over the world, and I have the opportunity to spend time with certainly our baristas, and I spend a lot of time with our baristas, but I also do a lot of work with our customers whenever I'm in a market, I have an opportunity, and I do a lot of customer seminars, and I do customer seminars with field operators so that I can leave them with a little bit of kind of how to carry the messages forward. And then I also get an opportunity to do a lot of work with the media because I'm not an executive. I bring a different experience to an opportunity to interact with media. So I do a lot of newspaper work when I'm in the field, and I work in conjunction with our public affairs and communications teams because I'm proud to say I'm an effective spokesperson for the organization, and that's part of what I know I've kind of built over the years. Excellent.
And you're an advocate for the company and for the baristas and the customer experience.
Yeah, and I have to be honest, I think at times I'm more advocate for the baristas than I am for the company, but I do the best that I can. I think it isn't as though it isn't one or the other, but I think I've come to understand something that is fundamental to every coffee company. And I really believe today it's the key to our business's success is in the people. Mm-hmm. And I'm thrilled when I say that, because what I've known about Starbucks since the very earliest days was that the most important part of our business has always been our people. And I believe today, for all of us in specialty coffee, I think the key to our future is going to be in the people, not ever discounting the coffee or the places or all of the other pieces that go into making a great coffee business. But the magic happens with the people.
Well said. Excellent. The two are not mutually exclusive. You could say that the best way to advocate for your company is to advocate for the people that make it work, the baristas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the future of coffee, this kind of segues into something that I wanted to talk about, which was that there is a distinct point in Starbucks' history where they decided to embrace a new direction with the stores and the experience along the lines of what a lot of folks call the third wave. And you were kind of at the crest of that wave for Starbucks. I wonder, we're talking about the customer experience and the future of coffee. And this is one of those moments that I think really is helping propel the company forward in that. How did you find yourself as a central figure in that expression of Starbucks with, the things like Roastery Coffee and Tea, the 15th Ave, and the Reserve Roastery?
When I look back on it now, it's like anything that is history. You kind of see one thing leads to another, but I'll walk you through when I recollect. When I had come to Seattle as a coffee educator, because I'm a passionate lover of coffee with as I said, the George Howell heritage, and I have stayed connected with the industry to a huge degree. And I'm a zealot for specialty coffee, even going back to 2002 and 2003. And what happened for me was that I was connected at that time to one of our leaders at Starbucks, who is today a mentor and a great friend, Arthur Rubenfeld. And unbeknownst to me, Howard Schultz and Arthur had been, as anybody in the business would be, watching what was going on. I mean, we've been a coffee company since 1971, trying to do whatever customers hoped we would do relative to the industry at the time. And what I came to understand was that our leadership was seeing exactly what the whole world was seeing, which was the beginning of the movement, which we know started in the early 2000s. I think everybody knows Trish Rothgeb and Nick Cho coining this idea of the third wave. And I remember the first conversation that I had with leadership, because I was a coffee guy working in our headquarters. They were asking me questions. What was going on? What did I think? And one day I was in a meeting, and our leadership had been to London, and they had visited a shop called Monmouth. I don't know if you know Monmouth, but yeah. It's a really lovely coffee shop in London. And they had taken a bunch of pictures at Monmouth, and then they had gone to see the Venice Beach Intelligentsia. And they were asking me questions about it, and leadership said, we're thinking of doing one of these as a test. And I said, well, it's so different than what we're doing today. I actually said it's almost like what we did in 1971 to some degree. It almost seems like we did that once. And they said to me, no, this is something that it looks as though customers are going to be responsive to this. And we think we'd like to follow this trend and experiment in that way. And not long after that, I got invited to apply for a job. And the next thing I knew, I was working for Arthur in a very, very unique job where I was asked to essentially work with a team to build the concept which would become 15th Ave and Roy Street. And it's all grounded in the same things that all of us do in coffee. It's people, coffee, sometimes tea, sometimes food, and it's how do you relate in the community. And we simply worked our way through those buckets, and we said, what are we doing currently in our business? Think about Starbucks at that time. In 2006 and 7, we were super successful. We were also seeing the trend in the U.S., which was downward in business. So it wasn't like we were avoiding that because no one was. But we were going to try something different, and that's how 15th Ave and Roy Street came to be. And I was given the opportunity to be the operator with a designer and with an executive leader with very little support from the organization, because a lot of what we did was almost separated from Starbucks so we could do something unique as an experiment. Mm-hmm. And it was just that. I mean, I remember the summer when we opened 15th Avenue, a lot of people joked about the stealth Starbucks and, I think we lived through a lot of people joking about us calling it inspired by Starbucks, because I think one of the conversations we had was how would we name it? And if you think about when we opened it, if we named it Starbucks, then we would have to open the door and customers could walk through and have significant, already established expectations about what we were going to do. And we were building an experimental business. So a lot of the things that we were doing, we weren't going to do in 15th Ave and Roy Street. One of the examples that I'll give you was Frappuccino. It wasn't part of the original concept. So what if a customer came to 15th Avenue, if they knew it was a Starbucks, they might look for the familiar things that they had come to like. So we didn't name it Starbucks, but somewhere in the mix, we decided to add to the name inspired by Starbucks. So that became part of what was a joke at times. But fundamentally, it was people, coffee, tea, food, and community, which is what I believe all coffee businesses are today. And it was just expressed in a different way.
Excellent. I think that, coming from somebody on the other side of things during that time, this is the time, I believe, earlier on where I was, I think I went in the first year that you opened those businesses, and there's a lot of talk in the coffee community about that inspired by Starbucks and wondering what's going on. And there's a couple of camps like, there's a copying, or and this is something that I believe is just that this is a movement that's bigger than just the independents out there. It's something where we should be looking at this as a establishment of a trend that is good for all of us. As Starbucks is experimenting with these things, it's proof that these concepts are viable. If somebody as large as Starbucks is saying there's definitely something to us, that should be a thumbs up from the community, because that just makes all of our jobs easier, and it does what Starbucks did before, which is promotes a movement of coffee for a larger audience, making more room for more versions of the same.
I applaud you for that. I wish you had been in Seattle that first summer, because we heard a lot of the negative. People are often louder than anybody. And so I agree with you completely. We are kindred spirits in that thought. I have felt as though all of us are in the business to show up for customers. And I think we raised the bar, all of us, not just 15th Ave and Roy Street and not just Starbucks, but I think we look at the trend in the industry since then, and I think we all enjoy a better business, and customers certainly enjoy a better experience today because of all of the things that have gone into what we now know as specialty coffee or third wave.
Indeed. Well, speaking of experiences that you want people to have, I'm wondering, what was the goal of these businesses? Like when somebody walks in, we talked about how there's not going to be a Frappuccino. What is it that you want to have people walk away thinking and experiencing from going to these cafes and concepts?
I think it's exactly the same as what we all hope to achieve. I think the bottom line is the bottom line. So we can't do it and expect not to. It's a business. So we have to generate the return on investment that any business would give, because it's not about giving things away. We all understand that we want to present an amazing experience that's grounded in coffee, that begins with the people, and a professionalism about the experience that is something we take great pride in. I think providing any guest with a fantastic experience might include coffee or tea, but to some degree, it almost doesn't have to. It has to begin with their feeling overall, but it has to also generate a result for the bottom line. In the most basic way, we wanted to celebrate origin through the expression of serving coffee in a way that was somewhat simplified. At that time in the business, our Starbucks business, successful as it was super complex. And we aimed for a simplicity which I thought was part of the trend, a focus on an origin story, a focus on a basic beverage created by a professional barista. And so that's what we were after. And we were very, very careful never to describe it as anything other than different. It wasn't ever intended to be better. It wasn't about better or worse. And so you and I both know that when you do it and you are already an existing company, and Starbucks was a very successful existing company, the risk is always going to be that people are going to say, wow, is that like a better Starbucks? And we were really cautious to just say it was a different expression of a great customer experience grounded in coffee, so that we could show up for customers in a different way.
Do you think that the cutting edge concepts that you were implementing in those stores sort of matriculated through the system and did influence the partner stores that were sort of the flagship Starbucks, the familiar Starbucks expression?
There's not a doubt in my mind. And I can look at a few things and I'm super proud. And part of what I've enjoyed in terms of people who have recognized what we did, because we were simply a moment in time in the history of Starbucks, but because the small team and I were able to do what we did, we saw things happen in our core stores. That's how we describe the business that you're describing. And things that had gone away, and I'll give you a great example. So pour over, when we came into the business and opened 15th and Roy, everything was brewed pour over or we had espresso. And that was not something that Starbucks was interested in at that moment. And what we were able to do through showing was to validate for Starbucks that there was an opportunity for pour over in our core stores that maybe they hadn't really seen as an opportunity. And so we helped the company see that in a way that, quite honestly, we moved the whole organization. And within a couple of years, we were offering pour over globally. And that's not something that I think would have happened had it not been for the 15th Ave and Roy Street experiment.
Mm-hmm. So that particular part, yes, it happened as a result of those businesses. And was there also a uptick or a resurgence in focus on education at a higher level at those stores too, because it seems to me that you're going to have to educate a lot of people on a high level in these stores because the focus is so it is so in depth to the origins and the story of the coffee. Not that they weren't in the regular partner stores, but did the education get a boost as a result?
It has to change. I think when you use the word boost, the implication is that one is low and one is high. And I'm always fearful of that because, again, I'm going to use the word different. That when you're a barista in a Starbucks core store, you have an incredible opportunity across the widest range of beverage options and experiences that you have to provide for the customer. And our baristas in our core stores are amazing. What we have emphasized through 15th Ave Roastery and now in the Reserve and Roastery business is a focus that is simply different. And the focus is, I'm going to say it's a little more simplified, and it focuses more on the coffee story, some of the things that you just described. And in fact, we of course have to have completely different training tracks in order to make sure that our baristas are equipped to deliver what we want them to deliver to the customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned the difference in the educational tracks between the concepts. What are some of those differences? And because you have to have a different goal, I mean, not a different goal wholesale, but each one has different details that have to be tended to. So what are the differences in the training education between the two expressions?
Well, if you think about just fundamentally, when one is trained, obviously you need to understand your equipment. So let's think about espresso. So in our core stores, we use the Mastrena machine, this beautiful European automatic machine, delivers great coffee experiences, but we don't have to train the baristas as much in depth about that piece of equipment. When we're working in a Reserve store, we have to teach the baristas much more in depth about the operation of a semi-automatic manual. In our case, it's the Arduino Black Eagle, but we have to give them that experience so that they can execute confidently. But we also want them to have a different understanding of the equipment. We work across multiple brewing methods in some of the Reserve and Roastery operations. In our core stores, that's not as much part of the focus of what the baristas need to know. Fundamental to everything is the customer experience training that we do with all of our baristas. I'm proud because I think one of the differentiators for our business that we're recognized for is our customer service, if you will, the way our people can confidently deliver behind the counter. So there's a similarity there, and the difference probably is in the environment, in the equipment, so that everyone who is standing behind the counter has a confidence that the customer never feels as though they're not in anything but the most professional hands.
I love it. Yeah. I, having, hired many people who have had a start at Starbucks, including my most recent hire from a past cafe. It was a Starbucks manager here locally in Louisville. They always come with such a respect for the customer experience and incredible training on systems too, obviously, because the company is a large company and there has to be a focus on those operations and systems. But without the humanity aspect of it, systems are kind of worthless. And so that's really awesome. I kind of think of that kind of service from Starbucks is kind of the Southwest Airlines of coffee, like a larger company that offers amazing service, but is still a large company. So kudos.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm proud of that. I often say what you just said because I think it's a key piece of what we do well.
So the people part of it, I want to kind of dive into that a little bit because the hiring process and getting a great team to not only value what you value, well, let's say you don't have to get them to if they already do when you hire them, but having them take care of all of the moving parts of something that contributes to this great coffee experience, it's a really difficult thing. How do you go about creating a predictable experience for your customers across such a large pool of talent through the hiring process, through the training process? I imagine it's difficult to make sure that that each person on that team is doing the best they can according to standard for the customer.
I think the key, and it has been the key since the earliest days of our business, is that it's from the very beginning, it's bigger than the coffee and it's bigger than the actual job that our partners, our employees are doing. There's a community of engagement. There's a sense of engagement that comes from the earliest days when we bring someone on board, where they understand that they're part of something bigger. And it's much bigger than the store that they're in. And as being part of something bigger, we also engage them or enable them to understand that they are a decision maker no matter where they're standing at Starbucks. There's a responsibility that they carry that they're going to have great support for whatever they choose to do. But where we are most successful, it's when we have a lot of independent, engaged decision makers at every level. Even the barista in their second day is feeling a sense of engagement. And one of the things that you often hear in our business, we talk about operating through the lens of humanity. And some people may listen and say that sounds like a cliche, or it sounds a little bit corny. But I have always believed that if that's really true, then right away you have a sense of being part of something bigger. I mentioned Howard Behar earlier, and one of the famous quotes that he shared early on is that we're not in the coffee business selling to people. We're in the people business selling coffee. Mm. And that quote has carried through since the 1990s. And honestly, it's not only Starbucks. I actually believe all of us who are successful have that same mantra, if you will, that what we're trying to do is trying to provide a great experience for people. It happens to be grounded in coffee wherever they interact with coffee. But in a store, it has to be about that experience in the moment for a customer.
Well said. What is the balance in those seemingly disparate values in between team being part of something bigger than yourself, but also being self-reliant and being a decision maker? Sometimes a person could be apt to advocate for themselves to the detriment of the team. Those seem like tricky things to balance in such a large organization.
Yeah, I think you're right. It would be tricky to balance in any organization, but the bigger you are, the more the problems can exist. I think it's always about good managers. I think you must have, the manager is the key, because it's the person who's running that team who is going to be the captain of the ship, again, to use a cliche. And I think, I don't know if you're familiar with the Gallup work that was done many years ago as part of the Now Discover Your Strengths. It's a great book. But I'm going to tell you that there was a pivotal moment for us as a company when that book and the work that Gallup did on identifying what makes a successful manager successful. Mm. And I actually look back on our history and see that moment in our time was when we began to understand what it takes to be a successful manager. Because what we're talking about, in order to have that successful individual, they have to have a sense of what their role is individually, and also what their part of the team is. And again, I think it reflects on managers. That Gallup work, I'll finish that thought because I think it's probably of interest to people, especially to some of your listeners. There's 12 questions that came out of that Gallup work, which I've used and many of us have used for years. You can actually use these 12 questions with any team and understand the efficacy of your team. And they're available online. It's a Gallup piece. And the first one is, do you know what's expected of you at work? Okay. And so right away, if you have a clear expectation, because once you know and you've set that requirement or that agreement with your team, if they know what's expected, you can walk away because they're going to do everything in their power to do what's expected. And then it goes on with 11 other great questions. And as I said, I've used it many, many times, and I know a lot of great managers have used this particular Gallup work to understand their efficacy.
Oh, I'm really glad you brought that up, and it's super exciting to hear that that's part of the core curriculum, if you will, for managers. I personally, no doubt, along with you, believe that the ultimate leader in an organization happens to be the line manager or the person who's on the ground that the baristas look to as their immediate source of authority and, good job or you need work in this area. Managers are, there's a lot expected of them, and I definitely would encourage people to pursue that Gallup work. We just had episode 121 of the show. Lisa Cummings is somebody who does Strengths Finder speeches and workshops for people through Gallup, and that's a good one to listen to along those lines. We'll link to what you're talking about too in the show notes here. So thank you for bringing that up.
It's I was thinking of things that have been pivotal in my career as I was thinking about our talk today, and I look back on that as one of the most important moments for me because I came into the business not as a trained manager. I've always sort of flown by the seat of my pants, and that helped put some starch in the work that I was doing at that moment.
I love it. Put some starch in it. So over the years, as you've seen things develop and your own career develop, you've obviously seen a lot of success, and you've become an effective advocate for the company and for the baristas and just grown incredibly along with the business. I wonder, what are the things that, or let's just say, what might be to you the biggest mistake that you've made in your career?
I think for a short time between teaching and when I started as a barista, I engaged with an organization, and I had a misplaced sense of what I might do with them, and I basically took a job that I didn't like, and I knew that I had made a mistake very, very quickly. But one of the things that we talked a lot in this hour about self-awareness and self-promotion, if you will, and because I had left my job as a teacher, I had made that big change that people had said I would never make. People at Beaver Country Day School said I would never leave, and I left. And so I was in a moment of a bad job, and I had absolutely no question that I needed to do something different. And that was the moment when Starbucks came along, and my possibility of being a freelance photographer and a part-time barista popped up, and I said, I'm going to do that. And it took me about 2 days to make that decision. And I don't think I would have done that had I not had the courage to make the decision before. But that moment that was a bad moment for me career-wise. I've been a couple times at Starbucks when I have had ideas of things that I thought we might do either through 15th Ave or Roy Street as part of the experiment or other things where I was so convinced that I was onto something good that I perhaps became too much of an advocate for it. And I guess I'm glad I never got fired for being outspoken in my advocacy for things that I believed were the right thing to do when other people said, well, we're not going to do that. We don't think it's a good idea. I think that's when you know you're in the hands of good mentors. But I think we all do those things. And I think I tell younger people today, err on the side of being fearless and hope that the people around you are really the right guides, because I think it's much more healthy in the organization. It's certainly more healthy for you. Whatever you're doing, don't stifle it, and certainly don't do something that doesn't feel right.
That's certainly a quick way to weed out the people that are good mentors and aren't, if you are fearless and they become fearful of that.
Yeah, for sure.
So on the opposite side of things, what would you say is your proudest accomplishment with Starbucks?
You know, I have a lot of things. We talked about 15th Ave and Roy, and I've talked about how I feel as though I was part of the movement that helped Starbucks in many, many ways. I think the work that I'm currently doing is the work that I'm the most proud of, because as we've grown and as we've become more and more complex, I have really wanted to make sure that our frontline people, the people you and I both kind of think of and respect the most, are really feeling as though they're on a path to be young coffee professionals. And so 5 years ago, I started to work through some of the SCA training. At first, I started to do it on my own. And then I'm working for a great guy right now in Asia who saw that also as an opportunity to influence the barista experience at Starbucks, starting with CAP, our China Asia Pacific markets. And so over the last 2.5 years, I was able to complete the brewing and barista AST certification, and I got my license last December. And we opened up talking a little bit about my recent trip to Shanghai and Singapore. I've been now part of 4 barista camps that are SCA Starbucks collaborations, where we're bringing some of the SCA material to Starbucks baristas. And I feel really great about that work, because I think we're changing the lives of baristas. Only a small group now, but I believe it's going to have some traction, and that's really inspiring for me.
That's awesome. Really diving into that advocacy for the barista even more. And what is it that you want to see happen for baristas in the future? Like, what are you working toward there specifically? If you could have your dream for baristas, what is that?
I love that you asked it that way, because I say it that way often. I think today baristas everywhere are generally in a role where they are simply waiting to do the real thing or the next thing. I don't think that baristas, to a large degree, think of that as a profession. It's not a career. If you become the world champion, it's certainly a career. But there's so many baristas out there who love coffee and who love what they're doing. And it pains me that there isn't a more established career path for someone who loves making coffee for customers. And my dream is that we build an even more substantial path for young coffee professionals to make more of a career out of what they're doing. I don't know how we do that. I don't know if it's with pay. I don't know the specifics yet, but I know that what I've realized with the SCA training and professional certifications is at least that's a really good beginning. And what our baristas that are experiencing it, both outside Starbucks and inside Starbucks, is they're telling us, we love this professional approach. In fact, even the professional track is named that because it's a professional track. And so I hope that in the next 10 years, we see growth across the profession of being a barista, where it gains greater respect in the eyes of the world. And in the end, the customer is going to win. The customer is going to have a better experience because they're engaging with even more professional baristas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And along with that, as things grow, making more money as a barista, of course, learning how to do more things and finding businesses that reward you for your expertise would be critical.
Yep.
Yeah. So what do you want your legacy to be with this company and on the world stage with baristas? Because you've had a world of influence, and so many people have been impacted by your education and your example. Looking back, what would you say would make you the happiest that would be considered your legacy?
I'm there right now, but I'm not stopping. I mean, you wish me a happy birthday. So I'm 68. So I'm closer to the end of this thing that I'm doing than I am to the beginning. But I think in 1995, I sat down with my boss, and it was a very funny conversation. I was 45, he was 20, 21, and he asked me what I dreamt as I started my Starbucks career. What's your dream? And I had been a teacher, Chris, and as a teacher, you understand very quickly that you're touching young people, and if you're doing a good job, you're probably imprinting them for something. And as a teacher, I hoped that my students would remember me. And I'm happy to say that many of them remember me, and some of them very fondly. Some of them probably think I was a jerk because I was a teacher. But I think what I said in 1995 was that if I join this organization that's growing, I hope that my voice will grow and that I'll have an opportunity to impact the lives of more and more people. And again, I would never want that to sound corny, but I never in my entire working life ever chased money as one of the things that I was aspiring. I didn't really think of that as a priority. My priority has always been, I love people, and I really love working with young people and seeing them grow and seeing the rewards. That's the reward. The reward is to see their response and to see them be successful. So now I'm in a position where I realized in many ways a piece of that dream that I set up for myself in 1995. And I'm in the middle, because of this recent reinvention, I'm in the middle of realizing it to a degree that I've never realized it before. And so I'm not stopping. As long as I get the opportunity to do what I get to do in all the ways that I can touch customers or the media or certainly baristas, I'm going to keep doing that. And I'm going to build a memory for people of having touched them in a way that I added value.
Bravo. Wow. I feel like that's something we should all aspire to, for sure. And congrats on being able to look back and say that this is actually materialized. And, so many of us are in a place now in our careers where, you go through ups and downs and you question, what am I doing here? And through those peaks and valleys, a career like yours, I think, is inspirational to say, at the end of it, with intention and the passion and curiosity that you've had, as we talked about here, you can look back with some degree of satisfaction and fulfillment.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I want to ask you a final question here. For everyone listening, what would your final advice be to us in specialty coffee retail? Us, who are in leadership positions, who want to be advocates for their staff and always, be pursuing an impactful coffee experience for their guests. What would you advise us to do going forward to make sure those things are a reality?
I'm going to repeat myself because I think it's the key to everything. I think you have to begin with your people. We have, and I've really felt as though I always have, whatever you're trying to accomplish, it's got to begin with the people who need to execute. And the other piece we talked about is that self-awareness. And if you're going to begin with people, you have to begin with yourself first. You have to have a clear understanding of yourself and what you're trying to do. And you can never embrace the status quo. You can never operate out of a platform of fear without this great positivity about moving forward, and the key is in the people.
Well said. Totally agree. That's such a key piece of wisdom for us to apply, and it's harder than it seems when we think of it like, oh, sure, I'll be honest about myself, but you're biased towards yourself pretty much. So this has really been an amazing time, just listening to the stories of your career and the history of such an impactful company, and also just learning about how to be better leaders in our organizations. I really thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom with us. How can we stay in touch with the latest things going on with yourself and with Starbucks?
Well, even for an old man, I'm totally connected, and anyone who's interested, please reach out to me. I think I'm the only major working at Starbucks, and people should feel free to connect with me. Anything to do with Starbucks, there's a great resource that's the Starbucks Newsroom, and they can find out anything they want. So between connecting with me personally and connecting with Starbucks Newsroom, I think they can find out whatever they want. I'm always honored when people reach out to me. And so if anybody is interested in anything or wants to chat, I thank you, Chris, for making it possible for me to talk to so many people. And I hope that folks will feel comfortable reaching out, because that's the greatest and most inspiring connection that you can make.
Excellent. Well, the honor is all mine. And thank you again for spending this amount of time with us on your birthday. I feel like you've given us a gift.
You gave me the birthday. This is a great birthday present. Are you kidding?
Yeah. Thank you again. And I hope that the rest of your birthday is excellent.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's not often that you get to sit down with somebody that has the kind of experiences that Major does. And for that, I am very grateful that we had the opportunity to be inspired by what he has learned over the course of his career, just igniting our own passion and curiosity along the way, and making what we do continually centered around people and the experiences that they have, both our baristas and the people who come into our stores. This is what has kept him going and has motivated him over these years, whether it's as an art teacher or teaching coffee. One thing is for sure, it seems like one of the things that sustains people the most in this industry is a genuine love for serving people through whatever they happen to be doing. And as coffee professionals, especially as leaders within specialty coffee, we can be so obsessed with the operations and the bottom line, and that all is very important, of course, as Major himself pointed out in this episode. But the human element here is never to be separated from it. So serving your community and loving people through what you do, this is a theme that we find often in our episodes on Founder Fridays. The most successful among us, the most successful operators at their core, or why they get up in the morning, is because of what they're doing to impact their communities, and they see it on the faces of their customers. And in the case of Major, when you get to see people develop under your education and training, and you are able to equip them to care for the customer in a very effective and genuine way, that's the kind of thing that any of us would find motivating. And so today, I hope you walk away from this conversation inspired. Thank you again, Major, for sharing your wisdom on Keys to the Shop. So if you want the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com and enter your email address on the sidebar. And when you do that, you'll be signed up to receive a newsletter that will be delivered every other week to your inbox. And it'll have the show notes for the past 2 episodes. Those are the key points and takeaways. And then the full transcript from each episode as well, if you really want to go in depth to it. Those are available on the Keys to the Shop newsletter. And it will also keep you updated, of course, on news. That's why it's called a newsletter. And as well as provide you with some extra links to resources that will help you in your professional development. So keystotheshop.com, just sign up under the sidebar area there, put your email address in. It's as easy as that. So if you have questions, feedback, or comments, or if you're interested in hiring Keys to the Shop consulting for helping you develop your career or your cafe, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I really appreciate all of you listening. Remember to share the show with friends who you think can benefit from the content of these episodes. And until next week, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.